Year 2321. Earth was no longer alone in the universe. After first contact, everything changed. Humans became part of a powerful intergalactic alliance. Technology grew fast. Space travel became normal. But peace was still a dream in the far edge of the galaxy. A war had started. The enemy was not like anything seen before. They were called the Dernik, fast, cruel, heartless. They destroyed planets like fire burns paper. No one knew what they wanted. They never spoke. They only killed. The alliance was breaking. Planet after planet fell. Millions died. Fear spread like poison. The High Council searched for a solution, a weapon, a miracle, and their eyes turned toward a planet that even they feared. A jungle world called Zeriung Sirion was wild, full of storms, strange plants, and creatures bigger than tanks. But what made Zerion important was the beings who lived there. Tall, strong, silent giants called the Tharnax. They lived in the deep jungles, followed ancient traditions, and never trusted outsiders. Tharnax warriors were 8 feet tall, their skin like stone, eyes glowing like suns. They didn't use guns. They didn't need to. One punch from them could break a wall. They moved like shadows, hunted like predators, and lived with honor. But they never joined any side. For years the council sent diplomats, scientists, even trained alien negotiators. All failed. Some disappeared. Some came back broken. The Tharnax believed in something called the bond, a mental and emotional link between two warriors. A connection of spirit and pain, of truth and will. No one had ever passed their test. Then came Sergeant Raylan Pierce. He wasn't a famous name, just a soldier. But those who served with him knew he was different. He didn't talk much. He had seen too many battles, lost too many friends. Some said he had no fear. Others said he had nothing left to lose. Raylan volunteered for the Zerion program. The council warned him. No human has ever returned from bonding trials alive. He just nodded, packed his gear, and left Earth without saying goodbye. The jungle of Zerion welcomed him with storms and silence. The air was thick. The plants were sharp. Every step felt like walking into the mouth of a beast. But Raylan didn't stop. He was taken to the trial circle, an ancient place deep in the heart of the jungle. Large stones stood in a circle, covered in glowing symbols. Fires burned around the edges, and in the center stood the Tharnaxton of them. Tall like mountains, muscles carved from years of war. Eyes cold and unblinking, they watched Raylan like a hawk watches a rabbit. Waiting, judging. He stood alone, one man against 10 giants. But he didn't tremble. A voice echoed in his head, deep and ancient. "Why are you here?" "Human." Raylan looked around, saw no mouth moving. The voice was not outside, it was inside. His mind, heavy like a hammer, he spoke calmly. "Because I want to fight, and I can't do it alone anymore." The circle remained still. No one moved, no one spoke. The silence pressed against his skin like a blade. And then one of the Tharnax stepped forward. He was the largest among them. His body covered in scars, his armor made from bone and metal. He looked down at Raylan with eyes full of fire. "I am Karak." The voice in Raylan's head shook like thunder. "I see no fear in you, but that means nothing. Fear is not weakness, it is truth. Do you have truth?" Raylan took off his helmet. Let them see his face, old wounds, tired eyes. A soldier's face. "I've lost everything, but I'm still standing. I don't know what your bond needs, but I'm not here to run." Karak tilted his head, a low growl rising from his chest. He raised his hand, massive and strong, and pointed it at Raylan. "Then we begin." The other Tharnax stepped back. A wall of fire rose around the circle. Shadows danced across the stones. The jungle roared as if it knew what was coming. Raylan took one step forward, then another, until he stood right in front of Karak. His heart was loud, but his face was calm. Karak raised his hand, open palm. Waiting, Raylan did the same, reached out slowly. His fingers touched the giant's skin. Warm, rough, alive, and in that moment, something shifted. The fire turned blue. The air pulsed with strange energy, and the ground under their feet cracked. Raylan heard voices, memories, pain, rage, silence, thunder. His past opened like a book, and K-Rock saw it all still. Raylan didn't pull back. Rock's voice returned. You carry a storm inside you. Human, and I carry one too. Let us see if we can hold it together. The bond had begun, and the war would never be the same again. Darkness. That was the first thing Raylan felt. Not the kind that comes from closing your eyes, but a deeper kind, thick and alive, wrapping around his thoughts like vines in a dead forest. He could not see, he could not move, but he could feel fire, thunder, memories crashing like waves. Pain he didn't know he still carried. K-Rock was inside his mind now. The bond had started, but this was not just sharing thoughts, it was battle. A silent war between two souls. And only one truth could survive. Raylan saw flashes, his first battlefield. The scream of a friend he could not save. The burning sky above the city of Solus 9. The silence of space after his ship went down. And a child's voice saying goodbye, soft and broken. K-Rock didn't speak. But Raylan felt him watching, not judging, just witnessing. Then the images changed. Raylan was no longer seeing his own memories. Now he stood in a jungle made of blood and smoke, saw massive alien bodies torn apart, burning villages, screams in a language he didn't understand, and a young Tharnax child, alone, hiding beneath a broken shield, eyes full of terror. That child was K-Rock. Their pain had the same shape. Suddenly the darkness cracked. Light poured in like water breaking through a dam, and Raylan fell, not physically, but through layers of thought and memory, crashing into something deep, something ancient. He landed in a stone chamber. Real or not, he didn't know, but it felt solid beneath his boots. K-Rock stood at the far end, surrounded by ghostly figures, old Tharnax warriors with eyes like stars and faces like stone. Their voices were wind, speaking not in words, but in feeling. They circled Raylan, studying him, testing him. One of them stepped forward. Half of its face burned away, its body marked with the scars of 1,000 wars. What gives you the right to bond with one of us? Raylan didn't answer with words. Instead he dropped to one knee, pulled out a small metal tag from his pocket, a soldier's dog tag. Bent and burned, the name on it almost unreadable. He held it up. He died protecting a child not his own. He didn't care about race or species, only what was right. He was my brother. And I carry him with me still. The figures did not move, but the air shifted, a low hum rising, like a heartbeat growing stronger. K-Rock stepped forward. You are not Tharnax, but you carry honor, and you do not hide your wounds. You face them. He raised his hand again, just like before. Raylan did too, and this time their hands didn't just touch, they locked. A flash of light exploded around them, white and blinding, but it didn't hurt. It cleansed. The bond was complete. Raylan gasped, suddenly aware of his body again, back in the real world, on his knees. In the trial circle, K-Rock standing over him, his massive hand on Raylan's shoulder. The other Tharnax warriors bowed their heads. A sound rose from their chests, not a growl, not a roar, something softer, older. A chant passed from warrior to warrior for generations. Raylan had passed. He was now the first human ever to bond with a Tharnax bot. The price of this connection was not small. Part of his soul now belonged to K-Rock. Part of K-Rock lived inside him. As the fire on the circle died, a voice came through Raylan's thoughts, deep, calm, permanent. Now we fight as one, and far beyond the stars. The Durnak stirred. Something had changed. Raylan woke up choking, not from water, not from smoke, but from silence. It was too quiet. No wind, no insects, not even the low hum of the jungle. Zarian was never silent, unless something ancient was watching. His vision was blurry, colors bending, like oil on water. He touched his chest. His heart was beating slower, steadier, but heavier, like a war drum sounding from deep inside. He stood up slowly, body aching, but something felt wrong. He could feel K-Rock, not standing next to him, but inside him, like a second presence in his bones. Thoughts whispered in his head that weren't his. Memories that smelled like smoke and blood, instincts that told him how to move, when to breathe where the danger was. The bond is permanent now. Karak's voice echoed in his mind. Calm but massive, like thunder rolling behind a mountain. Raylan clenched his fists. Confused but focused. His own skin felt warmer, tighter, his muscles slightly larger. Not by much but enough to notice. The bond was changing him, and then the jungle screamed a loud, high-pitched pulse, not sound, but a wave, passed through the trees, making the leaves shake and the sky flicker. Karak turned his head sharply. Durnok scouts, here, on Zarian. This should not be possible. Raylan grabbed his rifle. But his hands stopped. Karak's voice again. Your weapon is loud, clumsy. Follow me. Feel how we move. Without thinking, Raylan ran after him, each step faster than before. His feet knew where to land, his body twisted through trees like he had trained years in this jungle. But Karak hadn't taught him. He had shared his instincts. They reached a ridge below. 3 Durnok scouts were ripping through the forest, 4-armed, all black, skin like tar. Glowing red lines pulsing on their heads. Their claws slicing trees like Papa. Raylan had seen Durnok before, but never this close. Never on a world where they should not exist. How did they get here? Karak didn't answer. His eyes narrowed. His breath slowed. He crouched low. Like a shadow about to pounce, Raylan felt the same rhythm pulling him down. Heart sinking with Karak's breath matching perfectly. They were no longer 2 soldiers. They were one together. They moved. Raylan didn't use his gun. He picked up a stone, sharp and flat, and without thinking, threw it at the Durnok's neck. It hit the exact nerve point. The creature dropped. The other 2 turned, but too late. Karak dropped from a tree like thunder crashing, his fists slamming into the skull of one Durnok, splitting it with one strike. Raylan tackled the last one, rolled across the dirt, grabbed its own blade and stabbed it right through the core. Silence returned. This time, it wasn't peaceful, it was warning. Karak stood over the bodies, blood dripping from his hands. This is not random. This is invasion. The jungle is no longer sacred. Raylan's vision shook for a second. Something hit his mind like a paima. Scream, a flash, a vision, a massive Durnok fleet rising from the darkness of space. Heading for Zarian, heading for Earth. He dropped to one knee, holding his head. Karak placed a hand on his back. You saw it too. The bond is more than emotion now. It's opening the path. You can see what I see, and feel what I fear. Raylan looked up, sweat on his face, voice low. They're coming, not just for war. They want something here, something ancient. Karak nodded once. Then we must reach the temple before they do. Before they awaken what sleeps beneath the roots. Raylan didn't understand. Not yet, but his soul did something inside. Him had changed, and it could never be undone. Asterisk. There was no path, no map, no light, no sound. Only roots, thick and wet, growing like veins of some sleeping beast deep under the jungle floor. Raylan moved forward with Karak behind him, or maybe ahead. It was hard to tell now. Time didn't work the same down here. The deeper they went, the more the air changed. Heavier, older, filled with a silence that didn't feel empty. It felt aware every step they took. The jungle above closed behind them, roots shifting silently, sealing the way back, not trapping them, but testing them. Karak's voice was low in Raylan's mind. You are inside the Tharnak spine now, where our ancestors buried their memories, their fears, their last secrets. Raylan's hand brushed against the wall. It pulsed, like a heartbeat, slow and massive. He looked at Karak. What is this place really? Karak didn't answer, not with words. Instead, the walls lit up, not with lights, with scar stories burned into the roots. Thousands of years old. Images of creatures crawling from stars. Of a world flooded with fire. Of a war so violent it erased time itself, and at the center of it all, a massive figure with eyes like suns and wings made of shadow. Part machine, part god. Raylan stepped back, heart racing. That's not a Tharnax. Karak's voice was like stone cracking. "That was the first Durnuk, the one we buried under this temple. The one they are coming to wake." The silence twisted. Something was awake now. Fully, but stirring the ground shivered. From the dark ahead came a soft sound, like breathing, but not one breath. Many, slow, hungry, ancient. Raylan raised his weapon. Karak stopped him. "You cannot kill what hasn't been born." Again, a rumble echoed. Low and growing roots peeled back, revealing a wide stone gate, covered in symbols that moved like they were alive, whispering, judging. Remember, and Raylan stepped toward it, but his legs locked, not from fear, but from resistance, like the air itself was holding him back. He turned to Karak. "How do we open it?" Karak's gaze was distant. "With blood." "Not yours, mine." Before Raylan could speak, Karak pressed his hand to a stone at the center of the gate. It hissed, then cracked, drinking the thick dark blood from his palm. The gate opened, not outwards, not inwards. It simply disappeared. What stood beyond it was not a room. It was a void, dark, infinite, breathing like a living memory inside. Something massive floated, half seen, half imagined. A prison made of bone and light. And inside that prison, a shape, curled, silent, but pulsing with hate so old. It made Raylan's soul tremble. Kark whispered, "They didn't just create the Durnuk, they built a god and lost control. Now the Durnuk want to wake it again." Raylan whispered back, "What happens if they do?" Karak's voice dropped lower. "Then not even the stars will remember what we once were." Suddenly, Raylan heard something sharp in his mind. A voice that wasn't Karak's, wasn't his own. It was cold, hollow, ancient. "Come closer. Little flame, I remember your kind." Raylan fell to his knees, blood from his nose. Heat rising in his chest. Karak pulled him back. The gate must close now. Raylan crawled backward as Karak struck the bloodstone again. The light dimmed, the root walls screamed, and the gate sealed shut with a sound like thunder. Underwater darkness returned this time. It wasn't silence, it was warning, and far above them, in the orbit of Zarian, hundreds of Durnuk ships dropped out of hyperspace. The invasion had begun. The sky was no longer blue, it was burning. Dozens of Durnuk ships had ripped through Zirion's upper atmosphere, like blades through silk, their engines screaming with unnatural sound, their black metal shapes glowing red from heat, from speed. From something darker, Raylan stood on the cliffside above the jungle basin, watching fire rain from the stars. He didn't blink. A rock stood beside him, silent, arms crossed, eyes glowing brighter than before. Neither of them moved, because they both felt that the invasion wasn't just coming from the sky. It was already inside them. Raylan's thoughts pulsed faster now, Karak's instincts mixing with his, twisting logic with memory, pain with command. "They're landing near the eastern route line by the old temples," Raylan said. But it wasn't just him speaking. It was Karak through him. He could now see without seeing. Feel where the Durnuk would strike before they did, like the bond had opened a sixth sense that bled between future and instinct. "We must strike before they set the mind beacon," Karak said, voice deep and close. Though he hadn't moved his mouth, Raylan turned, eyes locked on the old forest trail. "What's a mind beacon?" Karak started walking. "It wakes the buried god." "Not all at once, just enough to speak." Raylan followed fast, rifle in hand, heart pounding slower now, more controlled. More Tharnaks as they moved through the trees. They weren't alone. Other Tharnaks warriors joined them, silent giants emerging from the mist, covered in war paint, armor made from jungle metal and old bones. Some carried massive hammers, others no weapons at all. But all of them looked at Raylan, not with hate, not with trust, just watching, testing if the human bonded to their brother was truly ready to bleed beside them. They reached the outer edge of the route line cliffs, and what they saw below was not a battlefield, it was a ritual. Hundreds of Durnuk soldiers had formed a spiral around a tall structure made of black bone, slowly rising from the soil as if the planet itself was vomiting it out at the center. 3 Durnuk priests, taller than the rest, wearing twisted helms made from the skulls of other species, their arms stretched out, humming a tone that shook. The ground Raylan dropped to one knee. The sound wasn't in his ears. It was in his blood. Karak pressed a hand to Raylan's shoulder. Focus. Lock yourself. Do not let them inside. They will speak in voices you miss. Voices you miss. Raylan suddenly heard it. His sister's laugh. His captain's call sign. The last words of his dying friend. But all of them twisted, echoing. Filled with teeth, the Durnuk weren't just warriors. They were psychic thieves, feeding on memory. Wearing love like armor, he bit down on his tongue. Drew blood, the pain. Snapped him back. A rock looked to him. We strike the priests first, without their song. The beacon dies. Raylan nodded. No fear, no hesitation. Just action. They moved fast. Like shadows cut loose, the Tharnax charged down the cliffs with war cries that made trees shake. Karak leapt into the fray, fists swinging like hammers of thunder. Smashing Durnuk like toys. Raylan followed, his rifle silent but deadly, picking targets like his eyes had scopes built in. Karak's vision guiding every pull of the trigger. They reached the inner spiral. Raylan slid under a Durnuk blade, came up behind the first priest, and fired right through its skull. Karak grabbed the second, lifted it into the air, and crushed its spine like dry wood. The third priest screamed, not in sound, but in thought. Raylan dropped to the ground. Head pounding, memories flooding again, but this time he didn't run from them. He used them. His pain became fire. His loss became focus, and he shot the last priest through the mouth. Mid-scream, spiral broke. The structure collapsed in on itself with a horrible wet groan. The beacon's glow flickering, dimming, dying, and for a second, silence, not peace. Just the eye of the storm. Karak looked to the burning sky. This was only the first wave. Raylan nodded slowly, wiping blood from his face. Then we don't stop moving. But far above them, on one of the larger Durnuk ships, something else opened its eyes. Not a priest, not a soldier, but something that remembered. Raylan's voice from the gate, and it whispered back, "You killed my breath, little fire. Now feel my scream." Wasn't made. It was ground. Raylan knew that the moment he stepped onto the Durnuk vessel. Its walls pulsed like muscle, breathing with slow rhythm, damp and warm, as if the entire thing had a heart buried deep inside. Karak walked beside him, silent as ever. But Raylan could feel it. Something in the bond was off. Their connection buzzed. Not like a signal, but like a warning. They had entered the Predator's mouth. The mission was simple. Destroy the relay core from inside. Cut off the Durnuk fleet's command web before the next wave hit Zirion. But nothing inside this ship was simple. Corridors shifted when they weren't looking. Floors softened like flesh. Lights flickered in patterns that made Raylan's nose bleed. Worses were back, not loud now. Not screaming, whispering his name over and over, spoken in the voices of the dead. He tried to block them out. But one voice slipped through. Not family, not friend. It was his own version of himself, colder, crueler, saying things he'd never dare admit. Karak placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. They are pulling from your roots now, not just memories, but possibilities. You must not follow them. Raylan nodded, jaw tight, sweat freezing on his neck. They reached the core chamber, a wide open space surrounded by bone towers and flowing black cables, like veins pulsing with rotten lighting. The center, something floated. Not a machine, not a being, but a presence tall, thin, skin stretched tight over bone, no mouth, no eyes, but it still turned toward them like it could see everything. Karak stopped cold. That is not a commander, that is a seer. Raylan raised his weapon, but the seer didn't move. Instead, it spoke, not aloud, but inside them. You broke our gate, burned our priests, spilled blood in sacred roots, and still, you come deeper. Raylan stepped forward. We're ending this. The seer tilted its head. No, you are becoming this. Suddenly, the walls around them rippled. Black veins lashed out like tendrils, wrapping around Raylan's limbs, pulling him upward. He fired blindly, but the weapon melted in his hands like wax. Karak roared and leapt forward, smashing through the tendrils. But the seer didn't stop him. It was focused on Raylan. Back as it recognized him. You are already changing, bonded not only with the Tharnax, but with something deeper. You carry our enemy's memory now. Raylan's body convulsed, his heart raced. But in strange rhythms, pulses that didn't feel human anymore, flashes filled his mind. Visions of the Tharnax war long ago. Of Durnok's seers opening gates between dimensions. Of something buried even deeper than the temple. Something waiting for a new vessel. Raylan screamed, not from pain, but from realization he wasn't just fighting the Durnok anymore. He was becoming what they feared. The seer leaned closer. You have touched the oldest root. Now it will grow in you. Then Karok struck with a massive blow. He drove his fist through the seer's chest. Black energy bursting out like a star imploding. The core began to collapse. Lights died. Walls cracked. Alarms rose like howls of a dying beast. Karok dragged Raylan out. His body still twitching, eyes flickering between blue and yellow as they reached the exit hatch. Karok turned to him. You saw something. What did it say to you? Raylan looked at his hands, still shaking. It didn't say I was chosen. It said I was growing. He looked up at the sky, still burning, still full of warren. He felt it again, something in his blood that didn't belong to Earth anymore. Raylan stood in the middle of the battlefield. But it didn't look like a battlefield anymore. It looked like a memory someone had tried to burn away. But the ashes kept breathing. Syrian skies were broken now, torn apart by the storm of war. Light and shadow crashing like waves in a dying ocean. The ground was split, roots bleeding, fires dancing over the bodies of both Tharnax and Durnok. Final wave had arrived, and so had the voice. Not a scream, not a whisper, a presence, filling every inch of Raylan's mind. Slow and massive like gravity. You are ready now. He wasn't sure if it was the seer's echo, the buried god, or something deeper. It didn't matter, because it was inside him. Karok stood beside him. Barely standing, armor cracked, breathing like mountains falling. Blood soaked into the earth beneath his feet. Raylan looked at him, saw not just a warrior, but a brother, a bond deeper than blood. Forged not in peace, but in purpose. If I cross the line, stop me. Karok nodded. If you cross the line, there will be no stopping. Above them, in the sky now glowing green with unnatural light, the root star opened. A rift. A wound in reality itself. And from it came the god seed, the original Durnok entity, older than time, awakened by the pain, by the blood. By the broken gate. It wasn't shaped like a creature. It was shaped like Raylan stepped forward. His body pulsed, veins glowing faintly, half human, half Tharnax, half something else. He didn't understand what he was becoming, but he knew he had one chance to decide. Why the god seed spoke again. You are my perfect vessel. Rage and memory combined, bound by war and loss. Step into me, and I will give you peace. Raylan whispered back. I didn't come for peace. He raised both hands, and the bond flared not just with Karok, but with every Tharnax still breathing. Their minds linked, pain and strength flowing into him like rivers into a storm. He wasn't just Raylan Pierce anymore. He was the living bond, and he charged straight into the god seed. There was no sound, just light. And then everything stopped for a heartbeat. Even time held its breath inside the core. Raylan floated, not in space, not in mind, but somewhere between existence and extinction. He saw the memories of the first Durnok. Born from stolen stars and broken oaths, he saw the temple being built, the bond being forbidden, the voices locked away, and he saw himself, small, angry, human. The god seed offered power, silence, control, but Raylan reached deeper. He didn't want control, he wanted choice. He burned the memories that weren't his, released the voices he never asked to carry, and chose one thing: to be human, even if it killed him. He screamed, a scream that tore through dimensions, ripped the root of the god, shattered the core of the Durnok outside. The sky cracked. The root star collapsed in on itself. The god seed began to dissolve, light leaking like blood from a wound, and Raylan fell from the sky. Wrapped in fire, Karak caught him before he hit the ground. The battlefield was silent. No more ships in the sky, no more voices in the route. Only Windralen opened his eyes. Not glowing, not twisted, just tired, human, and Alavi Karak looked at him. No words, just a hand on his chest. You did not break, you chose. Raylan looked to the rising sun behind the smoke. Yeah, I chose to remember who I am. And for the first time in Centuria, Sihashin was quiet, not because it was afraid, but because it was free.